Hi, I'm Gabe.
I'm Elaina.
I'm Terry.
Who?
Terry. My name's
Hi.
Terry Williams, and I'm pastor at Orchard Hill United Church of Christ in Chillicothe, Ohio.
Oh, cool.
Whoop, whoop.
And-
I'm
and-
also from Chillicothe, but I've been a guest on the show before. Elaina
Yes.
Ramsey with the Ohio Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, and I'm so glad to have Chillicothe represented.
Yes. Terry's your guest. So this is
Yes.
an RCRC show.
Yeah.
What's up?
So RCRC, we've been doing a few things here this fall. We hosted 2 clinic blessings to really show support for our patients and providers and the compassionate care that they provide. And so actually in October, we had our first one at preterm in Cleveland, which was very moving and powerful.
What happens at a clinic blessing?
Oh, yeah. Everything from, lots of great prayers, music, blessings. And it's a time to hear from the staff, but also people who've experienced abortion. And just to let people know that people of faith are supportive and will journey with their local abortion clinic, because at least in my faith tradition as a Christian, you're called to love your neighbor, and that includes your local abortion clinic.
Mm-hmm.
So we're there to provide a powerful presence. And we did another clinic blessing on November 9th at Your Choice Healthcare in Columbus, and Terry was able to join us along with 5 other faith leaders and some phenomenal leaders. So
Okay. So why did you choose to go to that?
Well, I actually reached out to Elaina pretty early on when I found out that they were going to have a blessing, because I had witnessed a few of my friends who are ministers in the Cleveland area at the first blessing. And I thought, this is really cool. I have journeyed with a lot of people in my congregation and faith community who have gone through really difficult reproductive choice dilemmas. And being a pastor, you get invited into those really intimate, really personal moments of decision that are so sacred. And I like to support everybody wherever they are, in whatever place they are, in terms of their decision making around their healthcare. And I thought, this is really cool that we, as the faith community, can come together to bless a space of holy decision and to bless people that are making a positive impact in healthcare in this community. So I reached out and I was like, Elaina, I would love to come to this. And she gives me a response that says, we would love to have you, come on. So for me, I traveled an hour up from Chillicothe because, well, frankly, this is the nearest clinic to my community,
Right.
even being an hour away. And to be able to bless those folk, to be able to be a presence of blessing and acceptance and welcome for the people who are doing this very important work in this community, which is my community because of the extension, was just a real blessing for me. I kind of joked that the clinic blessing was really a blessing for those who came to be a part, because the holy work that happens there, the holy healthcare that goes on is just a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Do you feel that these events were successful?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, of course, we got great press. So we had Columbus Dispatch
Nice.
come out and report on this. And it was just really great to also build a relationship with them, because they said they don't often hear this side of the abortion debate. And to know that we really are the majority, 7 in 10 Americans support access to safe and legal abortion. And that includes many people of faith. And so for them to be able to see that in action, to witness that, in the media, all the conversations that were had there, but then also for the community itself to come together, especially, I would say, the one we had in Columbus recently, that came days after the election. And for many people, at least here in Ohio, they were hurting from those results. And this was a time for us to be able to come together in community and offer, comfort and uplift together.
And it was kind of amazing. We started running out of room in the waiting room area that we had gathered for warmth. We tried to circle up around the edges of the room beforehand for a pre-ceremony blessing. And it was great because we were so close together. There were so many faith leaders that had come out who weren't on the docket to speak, who weren't on the docket necessarily to participate in the formal liturgy, but who had come to be simply presence there. It was really, from my end, it was very successful. I got to see so many different people from not only my Christian community, but also we had folk of other faiths, other traditions who were there. It just made it for a really positive, diverse experience.
So our side was there. The press was there. There was some other. Do you want to talk about the other?
Yeah, definitely. Of course.
Who else showed up?
Back some protesters, as expected. But it was really a stark contrast to the fact that we were offering, love, and there was celebration. There was, there was music, and just great storytelling. And then, of course, up the road, there are protesters with their grotesque signs and words of condemnation, whereas we offer compassion. And I mean, that's par for the course in this work, but I think it's clear, where people want show their support.
And in my religious tradition, we like to let folks know that you don't have to have a megaphone if your message is strong. And it really struck me that in that interaction, we had folk out on the streets with megaphones and these giant amplifiers screaming and yelling. And the voice that echoed in that space were the voices of women speaking about their health decisions and about how that space was a place of care and acceptance for them, and faith leaders who were able, without a giant megaphone, to speak words that rang true. That we as faith leaders, we do not share the same words of condemnation that were being shouted from the street, and we don't believe a majority of our faith communities share that viewpoint either. We believe that we are in the majority of people in this nation who feel that people should have access to whole healthcare, and healthcare that makes a meaningful difference in people's lives.
Okay. So, our folks that listen to this are primarily, in Ohio, but they're spread throughout the state. What's happening in Chillicothe that you're seeing that you want other people to know about?
So I think it's really important for people to understand the context in Chillicothe. Chillicothe is, about an hour or so south of Columbus. We're a community of about 22,000 in the city, but 75,000 residents in the county. So we're kind of a regional hub, if you will. We're a regional healthcare hub with a regional hospital. We're a regional cultural hub because most of the towns that are surrounding us are not that large. So when people come to Chillicothe, it's kind of this somewhat immigration of culture, if you will. And we don't have a lot of access to many healthcare options that are easily accessible in Columbus. What I see happening, particularly with women's healthcare, with birth control options, with access to abortion, with access to full spectrum counseling, not just this kind of targeted agenda-based counseling for pregnancy and preterm. We don't have that full spectrum of options in our community. So people have to travel a great distance away, or they have to make it up as they go along where they are. And what I'm finding in Chillicothe time and again are that folk who don't have access to things like birth control, contraception, when they end up pregnant and they don't have access to abortion, really awful things happen in their lives. They make decisions to try to end pregnancy through really unsafe methods. I was speaking with Elaina earlier today, kind of the concern about impending legislation, further limiting access. And I feel like for my community, for many of the women in my community, particularly poor women, their access is already limited. Their access is already effectively banned. And we're seeing that trauma in the community and trauma in women's lives and families' lives who don't have the access to safe abortion. They don't have the access to full spectrum counseling around their reproductive decisions. And it's really harming our community. It's harming communities around us tremendously. even being just an hour south of Columbus, and there are other communities that are much more isolated than ours is. Many more communities that have a lot more to contend with in terms of poverty and lack of resources. But even an hour south, even with a community of 20,000, we're seeing a negative impact on the public health, the community health, as a result of our destruction of women's access to options.
Okay.
Yay, Chillicothe. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's important insight. And I hate to say it, but whenever I see Chillicothe in the headlines about about law enforcement or about healthcare, it's not positive news.
Yeah. And I think part of the struggle for me as a faith leader in the community, I see my community in a very positive light in a lot of different areas. We're making great strides, particularly in terms of treatment, the opioid epidemic, trying to access some level of mental health care for rural Ohio, despite the roadblocks that the state legislature has put before us and that other government agencies have put in our way. But when it comes down to it, our local health department ended up, because of a funding snafu, having to curtail almost 90% of their programming. So access to contraception for a period, any kind of health education through the health department really got limited because of some funding snafus. And that just exacerbated a problem that was already there. Our community does a lot of things really well. The concern, though, is long term, we're going to have to do a lot better in terms of women's reproductive rights to serve a whole community, because it's not just women, it's women, their children, the entire community that's affected by the lack of access to real rights and real healthcare options. I don't know how that contrast to Columbus, but I know in terms of having real options, not simply this kind of pre-selected slate of somebody else's ideas for what you need. Columbus has certainly had its struggles in that regard too. But I'm really glad to see, with the opening of several clinics now, we're seeing a broadening of that, at least from my perspective. What's your perspective on that?
I mean, it was really great that we could celebrate your choice healthcare opening, providing another option for medication-induced abortion. And we need that because we're seeing our clinics closing based on unnecessary legislation, and all under the guise of religious freedom or trying to protect people's healthcare. But as you said, in the end, it's just causing more harm. So it's great when we can celebrate, more clinics opening and providing that space. So it's happening, but we need more of it, certainly.
Right. And your choice is on the north side of Columbus. And so Chillicothe is an hour from Columbus, but it's an hour south. So, you're basically talking about 90 minutes to get from Chillicothe. And that's assuming someone lives in Chillicothe. I've been down there for events and stuff. And if you're just outside of Chillicothe, it's rural roads that many of them don't go in a straight line.
None of them go in a straight line, Gabe. I hate to tell you, when we say down in the hollers, I grew up in Pike County, which is just south of Chillicothe, and my parish, Orchard Hill, actually serves Ross and Pike County. We don't have a United Church of Christ congregation in Pike County. And, I have a congregation member who lives right on the county line between Scioto County and Pike County. In that location, for those folk, it would easily be 90 minutes, even 2 hours, depending upon road conditions and everything else, to even access your choice healthcare. And through that process, you've also got to think about, driving 2 hours to, driving 2 hours from. For some of us is no problem because we drive all the time. We have plenty of resources. There are folks in my community that $10 is too much for them to spend on any particular issue in a month, much less the gas that it would take to drive 2 hours north and 2 hours home and pay for healthcare in between. I mean, it's just absolutely inaccessible to some people.
Yeah.
And it's inaccessible because in addition to all of the geographic things that limit access, we have this additional layer of obstacles that are placed on our people by the folk who are writing laws and prescribing legislation that's frankly unnecessary and unhelpful for their health care long term.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of unhelpful and unnecessary legislation.
Good segue.
Yeah. Next week, we believe we're going to see a hearing in the state Senate for the 6-week abortion ban. The Ohio House passed the bill 60 to 29. 39. What was the final vote?
It was bad. It was bad.
60 to 39, I believe. So the bill's passed one chamber. That's the important part. It's with what could be a veto-proof majority of 60 votes. It's headed to the Senate, and we need to stop this bill there. You guys know, but just for listeners, because if it goes to Governor Kasich, he could veto it, but then it would head back to the state legislature where those same 60 members of the House of Representatives plus 20 state senators could override a veto and force the bill into law. So we're going to fight this thing every step of that process. When you look at this bill, what does a 6-week abortion ban look like to you from your faith provider point of view?
I mean, it's just unconscionable that we're putting forth a ban that would restrict abortion access for whom many women don't even know they're pregnant.
Right.
For 6 weeks. And this particular piece of legislation does not even make exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of a woman. And so there's so many things wrong with it in the first place, besides being unconstitutional. But in the end, it comes down to not respecting that sacred choice that someone has to decide for themselves their reproductive lives and their futures and their families. That's not, moral decision making.
Right.
Or that's just coercive political interference, and it's going to have real life impacts on people's lives.
Right. And as a local church pastor, I see this legislation, the 6-week ban, as taking away the religious rights of people in my congregation. There are women in my congregation. There are women who have, graciously invited me into their decision-making process, who hold religious values that dictate they need to be able to care for the children that they have. And they want to be able to give their children a certain level of care and support in this life. And for them to know that they may be in a situation where they are forced to birth a child, carry a child through process that they can't care for. That is a moral decision that they don't want to make because they feel it's immoral to bring new life into the world that can't be nurtured or can't be cared for in that way. They need to have a decision available to them that's consistent with their moral and religious values. And what we're hearing from the Statehouse is, no, we want to impose our religious values on you. We want to impose our religious values on your bodies. And for the women in my congregation, the women, across the state who are women that hold values, religious values that aren't the values of, the 33 senators, that are sitting right now, it's really unconscionable to me that we are having this conversation about their religious values in Columbus versus our religious values at home. We ought to have the right to practice our religious values in all that we do. And constitutionally, we know there's a very, very high chance that this bill is going to be struck down regardless of the process. The struggle, though, with that is, why are we wasting so much time right now, time and effort and energy that the legislature could be putting into things like, universal access to contraception, right? Universal pre-K, really caring for the children that we have here right now that have been chosen and brought through that process. How in the world are we here? You know, from a religious standpoint, it's just frustrating to me because I hear this couched in religious terms all the time. And people don't understand that people have different religious values and different religious viewpoints on this. We care for the children that we have. We care for the children that people have chosen in this place, and we ought to respect people's choices. We ought to respect their freedom.
Yeah, especially when you consider, the ways we're unwilling to care for.
Mm-hmm.
You said the children we have today, considered a border crisis and children being gassed at the border, and the impacts of that on pregnant women. Like, we're unwilling in many faith communities, to say that we can support abortion, but we won't say we're pro-life, which really means we're pro-birth, because we don't want to care for the families and children in our own communities that, we want to say that we're pro-death or pro-war.
Right. Well, and I think the pro-life piece really, that phrase falls apart on this bill because, as you said, Elaina, there's no exception for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. The life of the mother is a critical component. As an ethicist, as a religious ethicist, you cannot establish this preeminence of people's existence one over another. To say we in Columbus feel that every single fertilized egg, every single fetus is more important than anybody else that's connected to that decision. That's a level of big brother implementation of values and forcing other people's values on us that I'm just not comfortable with. We need to have a right for each person to determine their own values and their own decisions over what impacts their own bodies. And we're losing that at this point. At which point we lose bodily autonomy in the society. The sky's the limit in terms of what the government can now impose on us. And for women to know that their state legislature doesn't care if they have been raped, they don't care if incest is a situation or an issue, and they don't care about their life because of their political agenda, that should tell us where we are in the greater landscape of politics in Ohio.
Preach. Keep preaching it. Yes.
You brought up I want to go off on a tangent. You brought up the situation at the southern border with Trump using tear gas, which is a chemical weapon on families. Is there a discussion within the faith community on how vocal to be in opposing that? It doesn't seem to be a massive uproar from, for example, my mom's home Catholic church. Where's the faith community stand on actions like that?
Well, let me tell you, we're entering the season of Advent in the Christian church, and I am absolutely clear with my people. I dare you to celebrate the birth of a brown-skinned babe who becomes a border jumper after Bethlehem, mind you. I dare you to celebrate that brown-skinned babe in a manger and then turn around and deny mercy to people at the border. That is completely inconsistent with our values. The story, the narrative around the Christ child coming in our tradition is that this Christ child comes into the world. It's this beautiful, wonderful event, chosen. Mary, decides to have this baby, and this child comes into the world and so threatens the power structure that the powers of the day, that the Herodian figure, tries to destroy this child, and this child and his parents have to flee into another country to avoid violence. What we're seeing on the southern border right now are people who are fleeing violence in other countries. They're trying to come here for a safety, a measure of refuge, maybe for the rest of their lives if they find, a good place to be. And instead of meeting them with compassion and mercy, we are meeting them with troops and tear gas. What kind of violent culture does that. I think you're going to see the kind of outcry around this situation, around tear gassing those families, that you saw around family separation earlier this year. Family separation as an issue, we saw congregations across the spectrum. We saw traditional conservative, traditional liberal congregations. We saw people who were more fundamentalist and people who were more spiritualist come together with one voice and say, this is unacceptable. Family separation is immoral, it's unjust, and it's not consistent with our values. I think you're going to find through this entire season that folk are going to have a real dissonance, particularly in Christian congregations, of worshiping a babe in a manger while we gas babes at the border. That's going to be a big problem. I think you're going to see that develop into a coherent voice again. Because again, people in our pews share that value, that these people have sacred life and value as they are. It doesn't matter where they were born. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. What matters is that they are human people with human rights, and we need to stand up for that. Regardless of political party or ideology, people are people, and we ought to love them. Here endeth the lesson, right? Let's give a preacher a microphone, right? You know,
that's the point of the show. So, okay, good tangent. Okay, back onto the discussion of state legislation on Tuesday, December 4th. There's going to be a rally at noon at the Statehouse on the west side steps outdoors. Hopefully it won't be actively snowing and or raining. Are you going to that?
Oh yeah.
Are you coming?
Sure.
Are you going to be there?
Terry's speaking. Hello.
Nice. Okay.
Yep. No, wait. That's Thursday.
Thursday.
Getting all confused. There's
start with
good stuff.
Start with Tuesday.
Let's do Tuesday. Okay.
So Tuesday is going to be a rally.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's invited to that. It's a wander up on the Statehouse lawn and wave your sign and all of that. Tuesday at noon.
And that's because that's we got storytellers, we got medical professionals, we'll have faith leaders. So we have Rabbi Jessica Schimberg. She'll be coming as well. Yes. And we have our friends from Catholics for Choice coming because everyone's all out to stop these abortion bans.
Nice. And then Thursday, your show.
Yeah.
What's up Thursday?
A faith leader press conference, also at noon, also at the Statehouse. And yes, Terry will be speaking along with other faith leaders about, how we trust moral decision making. And we honor that and why we oppose the 6-week abortion ban.
Very nice. And then the last event we want to tell people about is the December Repro Health Happy Hour. It's the same happy hour that we've done. December 11th is the date for that. That will be a week from Tuesday. And that's going to be at the Hills Market downtown. So profits for that, or proceeds from that event, benefit RCRC.
Yes.
So folks can come out and have a beer, pitch in $5 in the jar, and that will benefit the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice.
Yes.
And I keep hearing people ask me in these last few weeks and months, what can we do right now to really support our values around reproductive choice? What can we do? What actions, concrete steps can we take? And I know a lot of times with all the stuff going on at the Statehouse, all of the news that we're just bombarded with, we feel so kind of powerless and beaten down. Come out on the 11th and do something tangible to support the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. It's a small thing. It will make you feel so good, not just because you made a good donation, but you have good beverages as well, right? But come out, have a little fun, interact with other people as well, make that kind of community connection.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Hey, we're gonna have a signature drink at that
gathering,
what's the
and
it's named
drink?
after the morning after podcast, but it's gonna be in the morning after margarita.
Very nice.
There'll also be non-alcoholic drinks, but it'll be a good time.
Cool. All right, Terry, thank you so much for coming out. You're always welcome to be a guest on the show again.
Awesome. Thanks, Gabe.
Yeah, and you brought Elaina, which
fair,
is always a plus. So, okay. Thank you both, and
Thanks,
we'll
Gabe.
see everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.